we were extremely successful company. And I think our cost of capital for a while there was coming in around like 1-2%. It was really significant. Coming at about the 2% cost of capital for a while there. And then it's about $30 to $40 cost per accredited lead is where we end up somewhere.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Mike, and we are again with another episode of Multifamily Plugged. I hope you are enjoying your weekend and your Saturday morning. You know, let me just, if I haven't had a chance to do this with you, but let me be really intentional about hoping you had a good Christmas and that your new year is starting off with a lot of energy and a lot of excitement. Super excited about this morning. So if you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. Thank the person that invited you. Make sure you have your coffee and your seatbelt on, because what we're going to talk about this morning is capital raising. And we're going to open the curtains and look behind the stage a little bit, that great Wizard of Oz, and we're going to talk about some different system strategies and techniques that are really going to help you in your capital raising efforts moving into 2025. So please, again, if you are watching us on Facebook or you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, please. It helps. You're always get relevant content that we have that we share every day. New information. If you are one of us, some other social media platform, just like us and love us there so that it helps algorithm, right? But thanks for being here. And if we can answer any questions throughout the show, definitely use the comment box. My guest this morning, I'm super excited about, one of my business partners, Michael Wagman. Michael's with Nimble Capital, a proficient capital raiser, and really helps us when we launch our deals and raising capital on our multifamily acquisitions. Michael's out of Phoenix. Let me bring him in right now. I'm sure it might be a lot warmer than some others that we're broadcasting in this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
Good to see you. That's
by the
for
way,
sure.
It's 75 in Phoenix today.
Yeah, 75 and sunny, right?
Yeah, can't complain.
So I have to, I got to tell you that on Christmas Day, I got to on the beach a couple different times throughout the day, but it was, you know, it averaged 72 sunny. So not a bad Christmas Day, considering that I moved from Chicago to Southern California. And,
yeah, just a little nicer.
A little bit different. Anyhow, glad you're back. Hey, you did some worldly travel recently. You were like all over the world for a year, and you're back in Phoenix. And how was that experience for you?
I mean, fantastic. I guess you could say that's a bit of my claim to fame at the moment, is that I spent 12 months traveling around the world. I visited 19 countries in that time. And I was able to successfully raise capital the entire time, regardless of time zones. I wasn't doing cold calling. I actually raised $5.5 million last year while traveling the world and living my life exactly how I wanted to.
Man, there's a lot to be said for that. So, hey, let's start to dig in. One of the first questions that I always ask is, in one word, best describes you personally and professionally, Michael?
I am an action taker. That's kind of a hyphenated word. I guess you could say I'm like a serial entrepreneur. I have so many sort of ventures and avenues and things I'm going down all the time, but I have an idea and something pops into my head and I don't let it sit there. I just go. And I'm constantly motion moving forward. Sometimes to the annoyance of my girlfriend, I'm like up in the morning at 6 a.m. doing shit as fast as possible. But, I'm just always in go mode. I'm always moving.
Yeah. Well, I like what you said, though, an action taker. I always tell people, I say, look, when you come to an event, when you go to a seminar, when you listen to a podcast, you got to draw a line in the sand at the point that you learn something. And how do you put it into action, right? Do you think that you've always been an action taker?
Yes and no. What I'll say is that historically, in my younger years, I was always very lazy, but I was always able to see, what needed to happen next and how can I get there with the least amount of effort possible, right? So even high school, getting decent grades by trying the least hard, college, same story. I was always able to continue moving the needle, but it wasn't until I really became an entrepreneur that I said, oh, I'm responsible for everything that happens right now in my life. And so I actually, putting a lot of effort into things that happen later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that, I think that that's one thing, taking action comes from work ethic, right? You've got to have a decent work ethic in order to be able to take action. I always tell the story, I walk into a seminar always with 2 notepads, right? One notepad, I just take notes, but there's always those main points or keys that the speaker will say that causes me to write it down on the other pad. And those are the things that I need to take action on. And, invariably over the years, every time I would take action on those things, it would help move my business forward. And I'd always business grow as a result of it. Do you kind of find the same thing?
I absolutely, but I want to add a caveat here in that sometimes taking action is delegation. In fact, often if you want to specialize, taking action is getting somebody else to do the thing for you. And I think what has allowed me to get to this position where I was traveling around the world and not making cold calls and not doing all these things and still able to raise capital on my sort of time schedule is that, you have to be really honest with yourself about what you will and won't do, right? I'm not going to be the person running Facebook ad campaigns. I'm not going to be the person making 1,000 cold calls a day, but I know that stuff needs to happen in my business. So I have to find other people to do it for me.
Yeah. I think delegation's a big thing, so let's dive in a little bit. I'm intrigued with what you said, right? And I don't think I knew that. But you raised $5.5 million over the last year. You traveled the world in 90 different countries. How the hell did you do that?
The basic system, this comes from my background actually in high tech, and I kind of borrowed this model from SaaS companies. But when I first got into sales, I was an SDR. So I was a sales development representative. And my job was to make 100 cold calls every day and book appointments for the closers, for the account executives. And I put in the time and I did the work. And eventually I became an account executive. And then my job was to take pre-qualified appointments. And basically that's all I did. I didn't have to cold call anymore. My calendar was filled with pre-qualified appointments and my job was to close them. So I took that same methodology and said, well, how can I apply that to my current business? And the way I did it is I'm running ads. I'm getting leads. There's lots of different ways to get leads, but we mostly do ad campaigns. And then I've trained a virtual assistant to be an SDR for me, right? So her job is exclusively to call on all these lead lists. If they don't, see an ad and book right away, then they just end up in our CRM and our system. Somebody's got to call them. And I know it's not going to be me anymore, right? So I trained a virtual assistant to do all that for me. And, I went through a lot of the process. She was not super confident at the beginning, but over time, we managed to get her very comfortable with asking all the questions that need to be asked. And so by the time somebody shows up in my calendar, it's a pre-booked appointment. And I know already whether they're an accredited investor, how much they're looking to invest, and when they're looking to invest by.
So with this VA, now you don't just turn them loose on the phone, right? Have you developed and built some scripts and dialogues that they follow as they call people?
Absolutely. And a bit of it is sales training and a bit of it is picking the right VA in the first place. So, we interviewed a bunch of people and we wanted to see kind of who did our research on our company and what we expect, who sounded the most confident on the phone, because chances are if you're hiring a VA, they're not going to be a US based person, right? There's some really great ones in South America, but a lot of times they're in the Philippines. And so ours is in the Philippines. And so I wanted to hear how her English sounded, how confident she sounded, how it came off, from an investor perspective. And that was kind of the beginning of the battle. And then the second half of the battle is making sure that she sounds confident and comfortable answering questions that people are going to ask. Right. But the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, I don't actually need her to know everything about how a syndication works. I don't actually need her to know, what the IRR is on this particular deal or how to calculate these things or what, about what specific submarket in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't need her to know any of that stuff. All I need her to do is ask 4 or 5 questions and then get them to book an appointment with me. My job is to know all of that stuff. Right. So at the end of the day, it's really just about building her confidence and getting her really comfortable with following the script, which is just designed to get them from point A to point B and ask certain qualifying questions in the middle. And if they are qualified, right, because I don't necessarily at this point in my career want to be wasting my time spending 40 minutes on the phone educating a non-accredited investor how a syndication works for the first time. That's just not a really valuable use of my time. So I need to have very highly qualified accredited investors by the time they reach a phone call with me. And so that's how we trained her, and that's where we are now.
Interesting. So really, what I want to do is circle back. You said something interesting about sales training. So tell me, when you get a VA, what were some of your qualifications to get a VA to put them on the phone?
Really, the tenacity is going to be the number one thing. How willing are they to just sit there and dial 100 calls a day? Because it's not fun work, right? And especially if you don't have some sort of auto dialer system, the tendency is that somebody could look at a number, research a lead, spend 5 minutes saying, okay, this is what I know about this person. And then they call them and guess what? They don't answer. And then they've just wasted 5 minutes, right? So none of that stuff matters compared to the output of dial per day and calls booked, right? So for me, it's just going to be about making sure that they sound confident, making sure that they have the ability to stick to the script, get the person from point A to point B. And a lot of that is really going to be on me at the end of the day, right? So I want to make sure that it's somebody that I vibe with well and that I can communicate with efficiently and that, I feel like is a good person and a good fit for our company structure. And we got really lucky in that we found that in the beginning and haven't looked back since. But I know a lot of people will go through plenty of VAs before they find one that really works for their business.
Yeah. So you just said something else that I'm kind of intrigued by. Does VA take that lead that comes? So you've got a third-party company that's running ads, producing leads. That lead comes into your database, and then your VA takes that lead and research that person before she calls them?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes. I think I would rather not have that happen, right? The tendency is within our CRM, you can do a bunch of things, right? You can see how many emails they've opened. You can see if they've interacted with certain things. You can see if they've responded to a text before. You can obviously look up their phone number and find out where they are. You could even look them up on LinkedIn. There's all sorts of things that you can kind of do to get prepared for a call. But I really don't want my VA to be doing any of that. I want her to just dial the number, regardless of who's on the other end. The conversation is the exact same every time.
And so I have a million questions in my head, right? So I actually had this whole podcast pre-framed before we got on, and you've totally shifted my focus. Thank you very much.
I love it. Yeah.
But I love it because there's a lot of excitement in this, and I know anybody listening in who raises capital or knows that they need to raise capital for their next syndication deal needs to think some of this through. So let's talk about the sales training. So say I'm a VA, I go to work for you, Mike. What type of sales training are you doing with me, and what's the ongoing training look like?
So I regret actually not doing this sooner with my VA, because she's been working with us for now over like almost 2 years. And in the beginning, there was a lot of like a weekly call trying to make sure she knew the script and everything like that. But I should have done more handholding in the beginning, because actually, since I got back from traveling around the world, I decided to do a daily call with her. And every day she calls me and she pretends that I'm a lead. So I will run her through kind of a gamut of possible responses that a lead may say. Sometimes I'll be a dick about it. Sometimes I'll be really nice to her and we'll get her through it. And then after that, I'll kind of give feedback the entire time. But I'm telling you, if you do that every single day with your VA, in 2 weeks, they'll be an absolute pro.
So you're actually role playing with them.
Oh, absolutely. Call role play every single day.
Yeah. So how do you teach a VA or anybody, say a new salesperson, right? How do you teach a VA how to handle an objection? So I'm a prospect on the phone with you and I say, I really have no interest in this kind of investment.
Right. Well, so that is a flat out no, and that's fine. I would rather her get an answer and a no and say, okay, if this is not for you, then you're not for us, right? A more common rejection, the 99% of the time, what's going to happen is these people will be really nice, but they're just trying to get her off the phone, right? They've just been called up out of the blue. They probably, filled out some information and now they've been tracked around the internet from all these different syndication ads. And, you got to get yourself into the psychology and the mindset of the investor, where they don't, know about this that much. Maybe this is their first time looking into syndication. A lot of times it will be, they'll see an ad on the internet and next thing you know, they'll be followed around Facebook by all these different ads for all these different syndications. And there's going to be people calling them, right? And ideally we want to get there first. So we need to say like, hey, you contacted us. This is kind of a little bit of the outline of the script. Hey, you contacted us in regards to this deal. You were interested in us, right? It's not like, I'm not just calling you out of the blue. You came to us first, and I just want to see if you're qualified to work with us. So then she'll run them through the gamut of questions to determine, are they accredited? Have they done this before? How much are they looking to invest? When are they looking to invest it by? And at the end of the call, 99% of the time, their main objection is going to be, can you just send me an email, right? Or I answered all your questions, but I don't want to commit to a call right now. Can you just email me the information and I'll look it over? Guess what? If you email the information, they are never, ever going to look it over. I promise you. I've had so many people invest with me, actually invest, where I sent them the offering memorandum and they never opened that email. People do things based off emotion, right? Based on the conversation you had with them. And that's kind of it. They're not going to go do their homework on their own time. They should. They 100% should do their homework on their own time. But a lot of LPs, a lot of people who put their money into syndications are going to do it based on feeling and based on trust. And so then our job as the syndicator, as the person who's going to, be the custodian of their money, is to be the most trustworthy and to develop that relationship as well as we can. So if she gets through that process with them and they say, just send me an email, well, the answer is, I would love to send you an email, but I really can't answer all the questions that you might have. I need you to be booked on the phone with Michael. And if you book the call, then, I can send you the email with more information, right? So there's a give and a take here. And then 99% of the time after that, it's going to be, okay, I'll just agree to whatever time she suggests for a call, but I don't actually plan on showing up. So then I have her ask a follow-up question, which is there any reason that you won't be able to attend this call? Which is a really powerful question, right? Because it actually forces them into introspection of, wait, I just agreed to do something. Do I intend on follow through with it, right? And so in, all of this training and this specifically designed script, we've been able to have a pretty high show up rate as far as booked calls with me and people who are aware of what we're doing and are eager to talk about it.
That's interesting. So does your VA then do any follow-up work? So let's say your VA books call, you get on the call at the scheduled time with the investor. The investor says, well, let me look at the email. Let me think about it. Does your VA do any follow-up work then?
Absolutely. So if anything, I will always try to book a second call with the investor while I'm still on the first call. I think that sets a definitive time that they would have to make a decision by. And we really kind of have a 2 to 3 step process, more or less. I know people talk about how long the sales cycle is in capital raising and how you got to stay on top of people for months and months and months. That's really not been our model historically. And I think that if we got better at that, honestly, we would raise way more money. I think right now, follow-up is probably our biggest weakness. But as it works, I have an excellent call with these people and I try to book them on a second call. Now, whether that's with me or it's with my business partner, right? Because sometimes there's this sort of 1-2 punch where I don't just want them to know about me and my story. I want them to talk to my business partner too. And I want him to verify that everything that I'm saying is correct. So now they know the whole side of the business. They know me and him. And then, they feel much more comfortable investing with us. If all of that happens and we still, don't get to hear from them, they fall off the face of the earth, then I send my VA and I go, sick them, you track them down. But that's essentially how our model is working right now.
Got it. And so if your VA gets a prospect on the phone and the prospect says to the VA, tell me about the offering or tell me about the deal.
Yeah.
How does the VA handle that?
She has, at this point, it's been 2 years. So she has decent enough knowledge. A lot of times she'll get a question like, I don't know if I'm an accredited investor. What does that mean? So I definitely want her to be able to tell the lead, well, if you meet these qualifications, then you're an accredited investor, right? But as it relates specifically to the deal, I want her to say, that's not my job. Maybe not in those words, right? But my job is just to make sure you're qualified and to book you a call with Michael. If you have specific questions about the deal, then I'd love to book you a call. You can speak to him at this time, right? So that's, I don't want her to give out potentially incorrect information thinking that she knows something that she doesn't.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, good stuff. I think, I love doing these podcasts because I learn a lot from my guests, and I can only imagine what my listeners learn, right? But I've gotten a dozen golden nuggets here today already. So, being an action taker like you, I'm going to implement some of this moving forward. Let's talk CRM. Now, what do you guys use for a tech management software?
So we use Active Campaign, and it's good. I don't know if there are better ones. Originally, I was looking into HubSpot, and then Active Campaign was a fraction of the price, and it just seemed to do all the same things. But now, after a certain amount of time with our growing database, it starts getting really expensive. The more contacts you have, the more expensive Active Campaign becomes. So it works pretty well. I wish we could do like a screen share or something. I would kind of show you how we have it integrated and all these kinds of things. But I don't claim to be an Active Campaign expert, nor do I want to be. I want to be very good at raising capital, and I want to have basic proficiency with our CRM. I want to know how to find leads, and I want to know how to call them, right? But everything that happens as far as automations and email schedules and everything like that, I don't want to know anything about it. Honestly, I want to pay somebody else to take that mental load off of me. So I do.
Yeah. So I'll just plant this. And I think Mike, I think your partner knows this also, but we use Capitalist Pro, which is a version of High Level. And it's, they white labeled their version of it and love it. I made a switch about 6 months ago from the platform we were using, and it's been like night and day. So I absolutely love it. But
I'm about to start using High Level as well for my coaching students. So if it's better, I will switch without even thinking about it.
Yeah. And you're coaching on capital raising, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about your ad campaigns. So talk about, the types of ads you run, what your cost on ad or what your cost per lead is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So essentially, if you're in our industry, multifamily, right, you kind of have two options if you want to advertise. One of them is to do something really general and vague, like having a lead magnet. A lot of people will make an ebook, and we've done this, and it's kind of a really good thing to be running in the background, just for credibility. But the number of really qualified leads that you'll get from doing something like that is pretty low overall. I think you get a lot of first timers, depending on the content of the ebook and what it's about. We wrote an ebook specifically for people who have invested before. It's called I Wish I Knew That Before I Invested, right? In an attempt to attract more people who have experience being LPs. But if you really want to make a meaningful impact with attracting investors who are ready to invest, then your best option is going to be to advertise a deal specifically. And in order to do that, it needs to be 506C. And so we, at some point, I think our first 5 or 6 deals, we were doing all of them 506B, friends and family raises, stuff like that. And that was pretty effective for a while. But eventually we realized this well will run dry eventually, right? So we made the switch, and we spent a lot of money on advertising. I won't shy away from that fact that it's been a lot of money. But if you raise right and you build in the cost of advertising to the raise in the deal, you can be reimbursed for all of that. So the best strategy here is to have a deal that you intend to raise for, and run ads specifically about that 506C deal.
And when you advertise all specifically for accredited investors. So your lead generally should be a little bit more qualified on that initial response. Would you agree with that?
Yes, 100%. So you're allowed to say all sorts of things about projected returns and all these kinds of things, but you absolutely want a disclaimer at the bottom of whatever creative you're using that says this is a 506C offering for accredited investors only. Now, does that mean everybody who fills out the lead form is going to be accredited? Probably not. But you need that disclaimer to be able to advertise in the first place. You do not want to advertise a 506B deal. You will end up in trouble with the SEC.
Right. And do you have an idea on what your cost per lead has been for raising, versus your amount you raised over the last year?
Yeah. So this is kind of an interesting story. I want to believe that this has something to do with me personally. I'm choosing to believe that this has something to do with, we are clients of a marketing company. And this is the same marketing company that the big boys use. David Green, Brandon Turner, all the most famous people in the world of real estate syndication. They're all using the same company, and they're spending a lot more money than we are. But from a cost of capital perspective, for most of the time that we've been their client, we have by far been their most successful client. So spending less money, but raising more on that. And I think our cost of capital for a while there was coming in around like 1-2%. It was really, really significant. But things got a lot slower, I would say, in the last 6 months or so leading up to the election. And there was just kind of a lot of investor hesitation about what's going to happen, what the next 4 years going to look like. But prior to that, we were extremely successful company, and I want to believe that has something to do not just with the creatives we're running, but my ability to close the deals and the system that we've set up, as far as actually getting them to invest from marketing lead to advertising to actually investor. So I want to believe that has something to do with me and the quality of our company and what we have to offer. So to answer your question, yes, running at about 2% cost of capital for a while there. And then it's about $30 to $40 cost per accredited lead is where we end up somewhere. Yeah.
And then does that accredited lead, what's the percentage that lead that comes in actually invests?
Oh, I mean, it's low, certainly. I'd say at this point, we have a database of roughly 5,000 people, and I think we've got about 130 or so people who've actually invested with us to date, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you once they're in the system, there is an element of nurturing, right? So they see an ad, and the goal is this ad is so compelling that they book a call with me directly through the ad, right? They skip the part where they need to be chased down by my VA, but 99% of the time they put in their information and they don't book a call. I do get, depending on the quality of the ad or which deal, I might get more calls booked directly from campaign. But if they don't book the call, then they go into the system, and then my VA's job is to chase them down, right? But we need to have some sort of constant contact going on, whether it's a newsletter, a podcast is honestly the absolute best thing. And I kick myself for not starting my podcast sooner. 4 years into this, I'm finally starting a podcast. I kick myself about that, but something that really convinces them that, hey, I'm seeing this person a lot. I'm seeing their information. I'm seeing this deal. They're putting content in front of me. Now I feel like I know them. I've heard them speak enough times that I have a level of comfortability that I want to book a call with them, or I'm following what they're doing, and I'm a fan of what they're doing.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think I always tell the analogy that if you're out fishing, and I'm not a fisherman, and I don't think you are either, but if you're out fishing and you have one line in water, maybe at some point you'll catch one fish. But if you have several lines in the water, your chances of catching multiple fish increase. And I think when you look at it from a capital raise standpoint, you run ads, you got a telemarketer in place, you're making calls, you got lead magnets out there, you've got deal lead magnets out there. There's a number of things, podcasts, going to events, networking, meeting other people, having booths at events that might not be real estate related. So there's a number of things that we can do as capital raisers to get our message out there, to get our deals out there, and to meet people that may or may have an interest in investing.
So that's absolutely correct. I do want to caveat that, though, because it's also important to reflect on what is working and what isn't working, and to double down on what is working, right? Because you can easily spread yourself too thin by trying to go down too many avenues. And the example that I like to use for this is that for about 6 months, almost a year there, we were paying our marketing company double their normal fee to also do all the social media posting for us. So twice as much as we normally pay them. So they do the ad campaign and everything in the back end and active campaign, and then also posting on social media. And realistically, it got us almost nothing, right? And it's a bit of social proof, but it was a lot of extra work on our part to be recording videos and trying to edit videos and all this kind of stuff. And we raised exactly the same amount of money had we not been doing that, and just doubled down. And what if we took that same, couple grand and put it towards ads instead every month, right? It probably would have netted us a bigger result. So I think it's important to just be reflective about, there are so many different strategies that you can go down. If one's working, double down on it. That's all, make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes back to the 80-20 principle, right? And for people that don't know what that is, that's the principle. Came up with a formula that 80% of what we do equates for 20% of results. 20% of what we do equates for 80% of our results. And I always tell people, goal setting, take inventory of last year and what worked, what didn't work, what can you grow on, what can you push forward? What do you let go? So you let your social media stuff go, or are you still doing that on your own?
Well, the easiest, 100%, the absolute hack to getting a social media presence is just to do podcasts exactly like this. Start a podcast, go on podcasts. You end up with a bunch of clips and reels afterwards about you talking about things that you know a lot about, and use them, use them as your posts. And that's as simple as it is, right? You don't need to go out and record videos of yourself in public, because I tried so many times. I'm just not going to be that guy who holds the camera up and looks at it and says like, hey, followers, today I'm going to tell you about this thing. It's not me. It feels inauthentic. But if I'm having a conversation with somebody else and I say something smart, you can bet I want that on film and I want to post that to my social media, right? So absolutely, I kick myself for not starting this so much sooner, because it's so easy. Well, I mean, you could have a podcast in 2 days by signing up for 3 things: get a camera and a microphone.
Well, funny story. There was a couple years ago, there was a woman I tried to get on her podcast, and she said to me, "Oh, I don't have a podcast. I just go on everybody else's and take the clips from it and run them like they are mine." I thought, wow, that's brilliant, right? So you don't even have to start a podcast. Just go on podcasts.
Absolutely.
Talk about a compelling story, take the clips from it and run them for your social media posts of that. So, Michael, any last comments? If somebody's a brand new capital raiser or still raise capital, how would you coach them in the beginning, or what would you tell them is really important?
Well, first I'd say pay for my coaching, right? That's shameless plug right there. But there's a lot that is really important. It's about believing in yourself. It's about taking action. It's about telling everyone that this is what you do. And there's going to be a crazy psychological moment when it becomes, this is no longer something that I talk about doing. This is something that I've actually done, because I just raised real money for a real estate deal, and it's real. And then, then you're a syndicator, then you're a capital raiser, whether you know it or not. Maybe you're a fund manager, whatever, but you just need to start assuming that identity and becoming the person who raises capital.
Right. Yeah, I think it's mindset, right? Because a lot of people get discouraged early on, and when you really have to stay in the game, you have to stay engaged, stay connected.
I think a lot of people, like, who naturally is going to be very comfortable with the idea of asking somebody else for money, right? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of what this is. You're asking them for money, and you just got to get comfortable doing that, because you have something to offer that's going to make them a lot of money. They're not paying you anything. They're investing in you, right? So that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, thanks for being here. Glad you're back stateside, and looking forward to 2025 with you, our group. And, we have some things on the books we're looking at. And I think it's going to be an exciting 2025. So,
absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
How do people get a hold of Michael if they want to talk to you about coaching or pick your brain a little bit?
The easiest way is just go to our website, nimblecapitalgroup.com. There's a Calendly link in there. You can book a call with me anytime. I'm relatively active on LinkedIn too. You can find me there.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Michael, would you hang around for a minute? I'm going to say goodbye and just hang out in the back room for a minute.
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks again for your participation this morning. It was great.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Hey, that was a call this morning, and hopefully you got great information, some nugget that you can use in your business. We happen to be a business that everything we do is a function of capital, and you have to be able to raise capital for your real estate deal, for your multifamily commercial deal, whatever you're working on, in order to get the deal closed so that you can put it under operations and management. So hopefully today you got a lot of information. If Michael can help you at all, reach out to him. Remember, our group is always here to help support and mentor, provide coaching. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. And please remember, Again, a shameless plug for my book, my third book, Multifamily Investment Secrets. You can see it there behind me. Came out 7-time best on Amazon. Go get a copy of it. Go to multifamilyinvestmentsecrets.com. Get into the process of multifamily. Get into exposing yourself a little bit more. I always tell people you have to become a sponge. Absorb everything that you can. And this is a great read. Look forward to seeing you soon. If I can help in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great weekend.